welcome to FACEHAMMER, and
Hello.
it's me, Russ the Face, and I'm joined by Byron Ord, and we are going to be talking about Sigvald, and we're going to be getting Siggy with it.
We are going to be getting Siggy with it. He is magnificent.
He is.
Russ and I had a chat yesterday, and we've both been on the same journey, I think, with the Slaanesh book, which has involved making the same assumptions and presumptions in, I'd say, probably 3 different steps. Like, there's an initial step where you're like, oh, well, obviously you don't pay for a keeper.
Yeah.
Stage 1.
We've been sending each other like WhatsApps. It's like, oh, obviously this is probably better. And then you're like, you censor it to me, and it's literally as I'm like already coming to the same conclusion. So we'd be totally on the same wavelength for Slaanesh. So firstly, before we get into the show, thanks to everyone who's commented on the previous videos. In the Slaanesh deep dive, we've done a competition for a Series D brush set from Artist Opus.
Here, they're really good. Really.
They are awesome. And so if you want to see more about them, you could check out the Artist Opus YouTube channel, or you probably already know about it if you're on this one. And then enter in that competition. The next video we do, which should be the podcast episode about the order list we talked about, that will be the winner will be announced then. So you've still got a little bit of time, maybe like a few days, a week. So make sure you go check that video. I'll put a description linked in the description so you can go for it from there, and then make sure you put your list in there.
I love the idea of people getting to tune into the list show, which is about the most weird list we've ever covered in FACEHAMMER history, I think, and that's where they're going to check out his one. Yeah.
So, but make sure you go and post in the comments on that Slaanesh video your Slaanesh army list. Yes, it has to be Slaanesh. And they said people were like, "Can I put a different?" No, it's the Slaanesh army.
Use allies.
Yeah, you can use the Slaves to Darkness and the Wrath of the Everchosen book. It does count. That's fine.
It does count, listeners.
So yeah, so I respond to most of the comments on the video. So thanks everyone who's put their 2 cents in, and there's some really interesting stuff on there about Slick Blade Seekers, which has been really good. And then obviously, like, Vince has done a show from Warhammer Weekly where they rave about them. It's a bit long, it's a bit of a mammoth, but if you skip to the summary, that's quite useful. That's what I did, so disclaimer. But if you've got a lot of time and you want to paint, then
if you need to build any Slaanesh models, you can probably build 2 models while you're listening to the entire show.
Oh, I've built loads. That's all I've been doing is scraping mold lines and building Slaanesh models and feeling clumsy.
Sending you some more.
Oh, lovely. That's fine. That's fine. I don't mind. Like, I need the work. It's okay. Yeah. I'll be putting some contact details for commission work and assembly work on the website soon. So check that out.
Works out really well. Anyone who doesn't have much time, I find it extremely useful. So.
Yeah. It means I never paint anything. I just build stuff for everyone else.
I don't paint it. I just look at it all assembled grey.
Cool, it's nice. That's how I paint. I just paint it grey. No, okay. Got to dig myself, and I forget Les is on the show anymore to give me grief about that. So in this show, we're going to talk about Sigvald the Magnificent, and we're going to basically go through his war scroll, and then we're going to talk about why he's awesome, and we're going to talk about how you get the most out of him, what war scrolls and spells and allegiances synergize with him to get the most, and how you can maximize your investment of Sigvald the Magnificent.
To maximize your magnificence.
Yes. So how you get your maximum enjoyment from the Sigvald model in your armies.
Absolutely. Spoiler, this involves a load of stuff that is relevant to anyone who is playing Slaanesh or playing against Slaanesh. Because he synergizes with probably 5 different types of builds and a load of abilities and spells and stuff like that. So Russ and I tried to sum this up in a prep call yesterday, and I think we ended up, I don't know, talking for 50 minutes.
Yeah, I've got could have just recorded that, I guess. I've got like a whole load of notes. That
at least you know what pages the things are on now. But for a simple war scroll, I think he's a fantastic. This is a really good example of how you can nerd out with Warhammer. I think in a very enjoyable fashion, and with a very targeted result of making the most out of this model. Whether that's screwing up your opponent on the board, getting the most out of him, having the most fun, getting the most stories. They are all the same thing. just do them with a smile on your face. Yeah, I guess should we jump into
bulge
his
in your pants?
Yeah,
No,
a massive shiny one. Shall we just jump into his deceptively simple war scroll before we?
We will. So I really badly cycled through a load of stuff that wasn't relevant to get to that war scroll. So thanks for bearing with me. So I've got the war scroll up for people who don't know what he does. So we'll just go over that very briefly. 6 wounds, 3+ save, movement of 6, bravery 9. He's got a 1-inch reach, and he's got a few special rules. So obviously, his weapon is Ren 2, damage D3, 2s to hit, 3s to wound. Now the attacks, it says C below. What that is he has a rule where basically his attacks characteristic is equal to his charge roll unmodified or 5, whichever is relevant at the time.
So you're reading that profile, the worst he's ever going to be is 5 attacks, 2s and 3s, Ren 2, damage D3. And then importantly, his next rule, you can't negate wounds from his weapon, just flat, which is fair. I don't know how many things have that in the game. A couple, max, I think. It's pretty unique and it's outstanding.
Yeah, and it's so just to I'll bring up the core rules in a second and explain the attack sequence, because I know that we talk a lot about in-depth stuff in our shows, and sometimes people get a little bit lost. So I'll just explain why that's really important in a sec. But basically, we're talking about he's got Ren, so you still get armor saves, but it's all those saves you get after the fact, like your 4-up ignore and things like that. And speaking of which, the mirror shield that he's toting actually gives him that rule, which it says roll a dice, it should be allocate a wound or mortal wound. On a 4+, that wound or mortal wound is negated.
Probably we can cover what that means actually as well to help people out, can't we, I guess?
Yeah, and I think we'll jump to that in a sec, but there's one more rule which is probably one of his most important, and that is obviously the powered by vainglory gets +3 to his charge as part of that rule. But he also he fights at the start of the combat phase. So it basically means that if he
charged.
Yeah. You get to fight with him, but then you get to activate a second unit. Because
obviously we're in Slaanesh, so that's got some coherency, hasn't it?
Yeah. So basically you're able to go like, it's a charge, I start the combat phase, you fight, into your pick units alternating, you get to pick first, it's your turn. And conversely, in your opponent's turn, if they charge him, he gets to hit them first. So his defense is pretty good because he's got a 3-up, 4-up, and he gets to hit whatever's going to hit him first.
This model fights at the start of the combat phase if it made a charge move in the same turn.
Sorry.
Yeah,
there you go. So you've got a charge.
So only in your turn, but he is pretty reliable at that charging though. +3 is not to be sniffed at, and there's a particular host where I think he's absolute money, and I've not been putting him in other lists because we'll come to that.
He's pretty good. So in terms of the core rules. Just checking we can see that on the screen. So you've got in the attacks sequence, you've got your hit roll, wound roll, save roll, determined damage. So all the steps 1 to 3 happen before that rule takes effect, because actually when it says allocating wounds, once all the unit attacks have been resolved, add up the damage that was inflicted, which is where you basically do that. So even after step 4, actually, because that's determined damage. So you basically, after those 4 steps, you then allocate wounds. So it's those 4 steps first, then it's allocate wounds. So
so if I were to attack with something, it got through and that's got D3 damage, I roll my D3, and then that's the point at which, when we found out how many, 1, 2, or 3 get through, you take your 4-ups.
Yeah, and that's where, like, that save, if it's Sigvald hitting you, you don't get that. So it means that you're avoiding all those rules that affect after you've done your damage and they've had their saves. But he's got Ren 2, so most armor won't stop it anyway. So generally, most things won't get a save at all. If they do, it'll only be a 6-up. So
I think this guy's worth is in, it's not sending him into big things unless you can definitely do them in a 1 or either. I think he's just the most perfectly annoying on the outskirts, or stopping people from piling in, or he's an annoyance piece. And to get maximum worth out of him, which of course, as we're in a Slaanesh army, for me, that feels like the majority of the time it's going to be him farming depravity and just harassing people. Not sure if you've got different thoughts on that one.
No, I think you'd be surprised how good he can be against a character as well, though, because he's got quite a lot of damage, and he probably can hold up quite well, especially if you've used other things to debuff the enemy.
Yeah, or buff your own save or something like that, which we'll come to. It depends how supported he is. You can build a lot of different types of lists with him.
I think he's almost, I don't want to use the word auto-include, but I think if you're playing Lurid Haze, I'm really struggling to look past taking him.
Which is the Lurid Haze, because they all sound the same.
That's the Invaders host with the being able to ambush.
With D3 units.
Yeah. So
yeah.
It's probably a good segue. So obviously when you take Slaanesh, you have a choice of 3 hosts. And we've spoke about those on the other show, but basically you've got Pretenders, Invaders, and Godseekers, and they all give you special rules of depravity generation, things like that. Now, if you've got the Wrath of the Everchosen battle tome, they've got additional rules that go on top depending on what you've chosen, and we spoke about these a lot. And for competitive play, I think you're always going to take one of these because there's no reason not to. It's like
one of the Wrath of the Everchosen ones, that is. Yeah,
because you still get the same benefit and you just get a layer on top, and all it does is it pigeonholes you on what command trait and artifact, but they're not awful, really, which is nice. So yeah, it doesn't really matter, and the command ability is so powerful. It's worth sacrificing that choice for that. So I would say yeah, go on.
Just to clarify as well for people, these aren't a formation or anything. No. It's very easy to get all this. I still struggle with this stuff. So you have your 3 within your Slaanesh book, and then you take whichever one of those, and then you can take an additional, just 3 layer of additional wonderful rules and stats, which come with very little sacrifice, and you just get to buff yourself for free. And the book does need a little bit of help, I think. So why wouldn't you be taking that?
Yeah, and I see people on the comments on the last video were like, oh, you're going outside of the book. And I'm like, yeah, but when it's written knowing that those things exist. So
allies are outside of a book.
It's like,
never
there's
stopped
nothing
me.
wrong with that. Like, you can't, don't limit yourself just to the
I'm the wrong person. I'm the wrong person to say about going outside of a book. I've written about 3 lists in Warhammer that don't use a quarter of the scrolls available in the entire game. So, yeah.
So
what are your favourites then? What's the hot picks?
Well, I think if we talk about Lurid Haze, because I think with Sigvald it's probably the best choice. And what this allows you to do is you've got the ability Billowing Mists. So after you set up, but before the first battle round, you roll a d3. That many Lurid Host Invader units can be put in ambush in reserve. Obviously, if the scenario doesn't let you, then you can't. Then at the end of your first movement phase, you set that model up wholly within 6 of an edge and more than 9 from enemy units.
An edge is any edge, isn't it? It's not just
any table
the
edge.
Sides. Yeah.
And what's really good about that is that his base is only like a 60 mil.
Yeah.
It's quite hard to shut off your entire deployment zone, so it makes your opponent worry about the choice of first or second. Because if you don't take a formation and you go big drops, they don't really want you to A, shoot, and B, have Sigvald going in turn 1. But at the same time, if they go first, you're probably okay with that because that gives you the chance to get a double turn.
And it's powerful with this, just because, well, we're going to have another episode that covers some depravity nuances, but with the way that depravity is generated, being able to get a double early in the game is extremely powerful with Slaanesh, and you should be scaring your opponent with the prospect of that. Yeah,
and so that ability there is great for Sigvald because he gets the +3 to charge 9 away on a 6. You're going to get in pretty reliably, and also with Invaders you get to have more than one general, which is in the Slaanesh book. So you can actually make Sigvald a general. And what that means doesn't really mean a lot, but what it does give you is it does give him the other rule to do with depravity generation, which is if you're in their territory, you gain depravity, and also if he dies, you get a command point.
All right.
So the first
makes his
dies, so you're like, it makes him even better that if you do chuck him into something and he does damage and then he gets killed, you still get a command point out of it, and you've probably still got a depravity out of it if he survived a turn.
And generated some in terms of hitting stuff. If he hits things and they don't take any damage, someone got lucky.
Yeah. Especially with hitting on 2s, it's very reliable. And there's lots of ways to get reroll 1s, which we'll talk about when we talk.
I've been building my lists at 1980 or below very frequently in order to try and get a triumph. I think it's extremely good. I mean, he's got a good armor save. You could have him re-rolling wounds, which would be baller. Using command points on him for reroll 1s as well. Also extremely efficient. 2 re-rolling 1s to hit is incredible. Yeah, really.
And if you've got the ability to use the feign because you're in your territory for some reason, you didn't put him off the table, then you could always sacrifice to the feign, take a wound, and get reroll 1s to hit in that turn. So the other thing you get is you get a command trait, which obviously he can't take those because he's a named character, so it doesn't really come into it, but they'll be in your army. But the command ability he can use, and this is quite strong. So you could pick a Lurid Haze Invaders host unit wholly within 12 of a hero. So he's a hero and he's a unit, so he's within 12 of himself, so that's fine. Use the ability until the end of the combat phase, add 1 to save rolls. So basically he gets a 2+ save.
Just great. So like that is a bargain. It's an absolute bargain.
And because it's in the combat phase, you don't care that, because when you come on from the board edge, you're not there for the hero phase. So anything that buffs you from spells, you can't really take advantage of. So you can't Mystic Shield him on the turn he comes on now.
He might be out of range as well, given how you're using him. It's just you want him to be able to be his own dude. We'll talk about potential pairings with him throwing out with people, but a lot of the time I think he is going to be appropriately for Slaanesh out there with the stick swinging in the wind and trying to make waves before he dies.
And obviously, like the artifact you can't take, but having a +1 wound on another hero in your army is quite good, so that's important as well. But the Lurid Haze, obviously, one of the things that's really good about that is that you're talking about command abilities, and I know that people have said that in the list that we had, we didn't have formations, we didn't buy command points. So if you want to be aggressive and you want to burn through abilities turn 1, you might need to think about Supreme Cyberites or another formation like Seeker Cavalcade, and things like buying a command point for 50 points or whatever, just to make sure you start with 2. So you've got 1 for that and another 1 for something else, like the reroll of the charge if you fail it or something. So because you haven't got time to bank those points, and you wouldn't have lost a general, you shouldn't have done at that point. So it's worth considering that when you write your army list, how many command points do you need on the first turn?
Have you been buying any in the list you've been writing, or do you find you don't have? No, I've done a couple of 1950s and bought them, but I've ended up basically at vanilla 1970 with a lot of my lists 1980.
I think a lot of my lists have been a little bit more long game. So
I don't know how that works.
I think for me, like, I'm almost trying to make them death by 1,000 cuts, and I want them to stay alive as long as possible and take a little bit of damage every turn. So I'm trying to write lists which fall into that, so command points. And I said on the comments, I said I generally start playing with none and just see how it feels, and then I can always add. But it's very hard when you start playing with +2 command points to then change your list and drop them.
Yes, like not there's anything wrong with it, but it's a bit like having stabilizers and then taking them away, I guess, because you've got stuff in the bank.
Yeah, and I think you train yourself to play the army with that resource, which is fine. But for me, I would rather start from a minimalist point of view, where you don't have the formation, the low drop, the command point, because that will teach you more about the army, and then you might decide, actually, I'm needing it now. It's not, I need that extra thing. and the sacrifice of what I have to give up to get it is worth it. So, but I think it's nice to start from a base level where you don't have that. It's just how I work. Different strokes for different folks.
What you're trying to say about me playing a 1-drop +6 command point army for a year, and
that's completely fine.
Its effect on my skill level. Wow. No, he's completely right. That's why it made me forget how to play Warhammer, because I turned up with too many known, what should have been variable quantities already in the bag, like in a non-negotiable fashion for my opponent, and just knew that I had a turn 1 plan, and it made me worse at the game. So absolutely, it makes complete sense.
And then the other choice, I think, I mean, Godseekers, I'm not going to talk about that a little bit because I don't think it's that synergistic with Sigvald, is the Faultless Blades Pretenders host. Now, I quite like this one because you get an ability called Send Me Your Best, which is add 1 to hit rolls for attacks made with melee weapons by Faultless Blades Pretenders host units that target a hero if you charged. So it's quite good because if you want to make him a hero killer, I think the Faultless Blades makes him better at that job. I know he hits on a 2, so you like YGD +1, but there's a lot of stuff that give you -1. So,
or makes you reroll 6s or anything like that. So, you know, you could a lot of the time people, if they're taking one of these things, they're taking 2 of these things. You know, look at a Nurgle army, perfect example of that. You're going to rock in there and you might be on 3s rerolling 6s, which is way worse than it sounds.
Yeah,
or something like that.
With a stave and you've got -1. If you go to 2s rerolling 6s, it's a lot better than 3s rerolling 6s. So
way better. It also means if you are planning on potentially using command points or a triumph or something like that, you just want to take away variables from that as much as possible.
Yeah, it's useful and it's against your whole army. So like it's going to have other impacts in different places. The command ability, I think, is what makes him able to be a bit more of a character hunter, and that's
this is armor. Tasty.
Yeah, I love the name of it, Armor of Arrogance. So it's just like they refuse to acknowledge the wounds. They're like, no, they're too busy caught up.
Until you've nearly killed me. Until you nearly killed me. No, I'm not fussed.
I'm not even gonna until you've hacked this bit like the old Monty Python in it, where the guy says like it's only a flesh wound. He's like lost another arm.
Come back! I'll bite your legs off.
Yeah, exactly. So the Arm of Arrogance, again, it's a command ability, so all the things about command points are still relevant. If you do, you can pick a. So basically, it's in the combat phase, and you pick a Pretender's host unit within range of a hero. He's a hero. He's also a host unit. It's totally fine. Don't need anyone else to interact with this. The first 2 wins allocated are negated.
Explain allocate, just to make it super clear.
That's after saves. So
good. That's basically like, I don't know on average what that's going to be in terms of the amount of wounds it takes to get 2 through to that point, but it's lots, right?
Yeah. So with his warscroll with the mirror shield, so it says roll a dice each time you allocate a wound or mortal wound. On a 4+, it's negated. So I believe, I'm going to trip myself up here. So let me just double check this. The first 2 is allocated to that unit are negated. So, yeah, so you wouldn't have, would you have a choice in that? I'm just trying to think the interaction with that. You allocate a wound, the first 2 allocated. So no, I think you wouldn't get his after save.
They kind of eat each other.
Ones. Yeah, they're kind of at the same time, but because it says first, that's how I would play it. So I would play it that the first 2 armor saves you fail, you wouldn't have to make a 4-up.
Correct.
Then anything else, you'd have to make your 4-up. So
when in doubt, also, it's always best to play the most skeptical version until clarified otherwise.
I think it's always, if you play the weaker version, like,
you get a Christmas present.
It's only going to make you, if they FAQ it the other way, you're like, brilliant bonus. And then also the fact is when you talk to your opponent, if there's any question, sometimes, like, because you're erring on the side of where you think logically it should be, even though actually you want it to be the other way, then that's going to at least give you, you know, like almost as if saying, actually, yeah, I'm playing the weaker ones. You're not going to have an argument or discussion about it. You know,
Yeah.
it's like
Starting off with a good tone as well, doesn't it?
yeah. So I really like that. And then you obviously the trait and artifact doesn't really matter, but you've got that resilience. Now, you could argue Lurid Haze has resilience because you get the +1 armor save. I personally quite like that command ability as well. So it's like, I think they're both good.
Still in the combat phase, so it might not. It's only going to affect you with melee stuff, right?
Yeah. But it's normally what allows you to do is charge Sigvald into a big beastie, and particularly if they're immortal wounds. Take for example like a Terragast bite does 6 mortal wounds.
Yeah.
If you know like, the first 2 ignore, then you're like, well, I'm probably not going to die from that.
Is it at the start of the combat phase, or is it in the combat phase?
In the combat phase.
So you could go in there, strike first, kill it, and be like, I don't need it.
No, exactly.
That's nice. I like that. It's good interaction.
So I'm sure that you would basically be able to use it maybe even as and when the wounds come in. I normally do things like that, like before this attack sequence starts, because the sequence is a sequence and shouldn't get interrupted by a command ability.
Like using a triumph, or something like that. Yeah, agreed.
That's kind of the 2 standouts. I think for me, Lurid Haze is
it's just more
S tier because
it's more fun. It's severely fun.
I think it gives you some really nice options with being aggressive and getting into your opponent's head, whereas the Pretenders one is a little bit less impactful.
Should we talk about exactly how that's going to play out on the table? Because I think it's very easy to hear something like this and not twig that you're going to deploy your army. You're then going to roll a random amount, which is up minimum 1 up to 3. 3's tons. 2 is awesome. 1 is still fine. And that many things that you've deployed and your opponent has potentially reacted to or tried to not react to, in which case you're already screwing the head. You're then going to move and put in the most annoying plays possible for them. And just knowing that is going to be a thing is awful. And then it happening with 3, the effect of that before a game has begun is crazy. And how it plays with the choice of who is going to get to go first, or the decision of the person who's going to get to make that, is quite a big deal, right?
Yeah, I think because of the timing of it, because it's not before setup, what's quite nice is they all set up their army, you set up your army, and they might ask you, have you got anything that come on? You go, yeah, I've got an ability that allows me to do this. And they might set their army up, but they don't know what you've put off the table. So they might leave a 60 mil gap, but not realize that they needed to close it off, because they might leave. Because normally when, like, if you've got like 5 slick blades, that's quite a big footprint. So you don't need to be like 9 away from every edge. So you can leave a little bit of a gap. So they might leave a space, and then what happens is you go then, before you decide turns or anything, you roll your D3 and you go, right, I'll put Sigvald off. Now, there's another conversation about Warhammer psychology here, but if they've got the choice of turn, you, by doing that and taking him off, and then before you take him off, you could even like measure and check if there's a gap for him.
Yeah, which you should do, because that's gonna dictate your decisions. You should have that information as soon as possible.
What that does as well, that makes your opponent, they might have in their head already gone, I'm going to go first, I'm going to do this, so I've deployed this way because I'm going to go first, or you're going to go first because I'm going to make you go first, so I'm going to deploy like this. So if they're like, I'm going to go first, so I've tapped this way, I've put on this, I've gone on this edge, this doesn't really matter because I'm going to run here and do this.
I'm getting that objective first, whatever it is, and they're going to be safe for a turn because they can't be reached.
Yeah, but I mean, what's really good about this is it means if they go first, they're then going to have to worry about keeping the board locked down after they've moved, which is a pain.
And giving you the double.
And you've got the chance to double. But if they go, actually, I'm going to make you go first because I've got the choice, but then you take Sigvald off the table and you can fit him in a space, and you remind them politely that he gets +3 to his charge roll, and then they go, oh, I better take the first turn just because I don't want that happening. And straight away, all that stuff they had laid out in their head has just fallen away,
been scrambled. Yeah,
and the power of that cannot be understated. And there's nothing.
They're going to have to move forwards while staying back if they don't want you to pop on the rear board edge as well, which is always, it feels horrible.
But it also just wrong foots someone, so it makes you second guess yourself, and then you might then make a mistake because one of the decisions in your head you were going to do, you no longer should do it, but you still do it because circumstances have changed, but you've not readjusted the plan. So it does. I think it's so disruptive that it's what I would call like the best choice.
I completely agree. It's fun, and it lets you fix your cock ups as well. It's not just about your opponent. If you made a whoopsie, you can fix that extremely flexibly with up to 3 units.
Deploy and then go. You might even do something sneaky, like you can deploy. I mean, this is going into more about the Lurid Haze, but you could actually set your unit in range. They set up and measuring all their ranges, and then you just take the unit off the table.
Yep.
And you're like,
absolutely.
But then you take Sigvald off the table as well. So they're like, I don't.
And that unit can back him up. Let's remember he's a hero, and he's probably going to make his charge pretty reliably. So if you want to back him up with, it could be anything in the book. If you roll that 2, he could pop on with 5 elite armored dudes, or some seekers, or some archers who are going to shoot, and then he's going to give them back a chance of making their charge because he might let them re-roll it. Anything like that. It's very, very flexible. Also, Slaanesh is so fast that if you just roll a 1, you can have some seekers or something just run up to stand next to him, and then you get the same situation. They might even be able to be closer with their run roll to make the charge without you needing to spend a CP on it. And then he's got backup, and with backup, I think he's incredible. Yeah,
and that's great with like the command trait in Haze. You get to re-roll run rolls. So if you've got seekers, they get a 2d6 run with a re-roll. With their movement like 14, you're going to be pretty much where you want to be,
and they can run and charge all everything.
So let's talk about the war scrolls that complement Sigvald. So although we sort of say, I think we said that he kind of his own thing and he does his own thing, he doesn't really buff anything else, but there are lots of things buff him, and probably one of the things that is worth talking about is just the Keeper of Secrets. And actually the more Slaanesh theory crafting we've been doing, I think the more auto-include the Keeper becomes.
Yeah. Should we talk about the reason? Should we talk about the reason why?
In the next show when we talk about depravity, I think is probably the bit. But if you want to check that out, it will be at the end of this video.
Yeah.
But with the Keeper, obviously the most obvious thing is the command ability Excess of Violence. So it says you could use this in the combat phase. Pick a Hedonite unit that's already fought and is within 12. That's not wholly within 12. That can be picked to fight for a second time. So with Sigvald, you charge, you fight because you go first. Then it's your turn to pick. You can use this command ability. You could go again. So again, it's command point hungry. But if you're thinking, well, I'm not worried about getting hit, I just want to kill the thing I'm fighting, then you just go twice.
There's something that really needs covering here as well. You're operating with some known information at that point. So if you rolled an 11-inch charge, right? You see where I'm going with this. If you rolled that 11-inch charge and Sigvald just wiped out a unit or nearly wiped out a unit, you know that he's got 11 attacks, 2s and 3s, Rend 2, damage D3, negating saves, which... that information is really, really valuable with the Keeper next to you, because you're like, well, screw it. I barely care about this Keeper's attacks because I've got this guy who's about to rock on. And 2 pile-ins with a small base allows you to be extremely awkward, and you're going to make your opponents piles in awkward because you're Slaanesh.
Yeah. So it's, for me, it's a different way of using it. Now, what this will mean is if you're doing the Lurid Haze Invaders ambush, you need to get the Keeper off as well to ambush the Keeper.
It's a scary pairing, isn't it? Also, that you summon around heroes in Slaanesh, so obviously you might kill your way to having enough space to drop a pretty scary unit next turn. Which again, if you get the double turn or the priority roll or something like that, it's got some very intimidating implications for someone.
Yeah, and I think you might be able to do it where you come on from the side and you keep it run and be within range, but I think you're almost trying to force it too much. If you've got a better position, you're probably better off just ignoring that. But the fact that the Keeper is you know, he can go off the board as well. Now, obviously, this will depend on how much space the opponent's left, or if you've got any, or it might not be worth it. But you're acting on the deployment off the table after they've deployed, so it's a really strong choice.
You get reroll runs quite easily.
Yeah.
So you could actually.
Well, he could have the command trait that from Lurid Haze to give him reroll runs. So
yeah, exactly. So you could have a pretty decent chance of being able to run your 14-inch plus, hopefully at least 3 dude up the table to be wholly within 12 of Siggy. Yeah. He's only got to be wholly within 12 at the point at which he used the ability as well. So he could be just about wholly within 12. Do it, and then he piles in out, and then he goes crazy, and you don't care at that point.
Yeah, exactly. So, but Keeper of Secrets also is a demon. So, if you charge, you get to use the Locus. So, the Locus is really powerful when you're charging units because it stops them being able to get many attacks back on your heroes. So, from a survivability point of view, it kind of rockets the power of Sigvald and the Keeper himself. And the Keeper,
what is that Locus specifically?
So when you're in Locus of Diversion, so when you're in combat, I think at the beginning of the combat phase, or it might be the end of the charge phase, you roll a dice. Let me just get it up, actually. Let me just double check it, because I'm in my head, I'm thinking of the old one as well.
No worries. I thought I'd check.
So let me just do that, and then hopefully we can see it. So Locus of Diversion. So at the end of the charge phase, each friendly demon hero within 1 of an enemy can create a Locus. Pick an enemy within 1, roll a dice, adding 1 if you're a greater demon. On a 4+, the unit cannot make pile-ins in the following combat phase.
It's on a 3+ for.
So it's on a 3-up for the Keeper. So but it's at the end of the charge phase. So if the Keeper then successfully charges, the same target that Sigvald's charging, then you can do that as well. And he's got quite a long reach. So although you've got to be within 1, Sigvald activates immediately. Then you could activate the Keeper, and then you could command ability to activate again. So the Keeper, because he's charged, if you've wiped the unit out, so you'll get to basically fight with Sigvald. It's your turn to activate, so you just activate the Keeper normally. If you haven't wiped the screen out, if you have, then you get a 3-inch pile-in, and you've got a 3-inch reach. So you could basically go in. So you got like Sigvald and a unit. So he goes in, the Keeper goes in. Sigvald kills the unit. The Keeper piles in past the unit, hits this unit, then kills that unit. Then you pick the command ability, pile in here, and then kill this unit because you still charge that turn.
So it's up to 6-inch threat, potentially twice, which. Bleh.
Yeah, and like depending on how they've set up or what's on the table, that allows you to do some pretty significant damage. Obviously, the Keeper's going to need a 9 to charge, so it's not guaranteed.
So the reroll chances aren't bad, though.
But again, like you're looking at burning 2 to 3 command points, so you're going to have to be putting some in your list. You're going to have 2 if you pay for 1, but you might also want a formation. So it's one of those things that you have to make that decision how much you lean into that, because that combo relies on you, 1, getting 2 units to go off the table, 3, being able to put them in a place to do it, 4, the opponent deploying in a way that allows you to do it, basically, having the command points, making the charges, and then
you also leave your Keeper potentially exposed, right? Because it's not mega survivable as a model. Whereas Sigvald, I think, due to his base size and his save and after save, he is somewhat. For this reason, the Keeper, even though it's just just little stuff, the Sinistrous Hand that lets you heal, and the Shining Aegis, which is basically a 6-up after save, I've been considering them more in my recent list than I was in my first wave of Seeker inclusive lists. Keeper Secret.
I think they're all good. I think the what's particularly powerful as well is if you because you've got Sigvald, he could be in a position where the Keeper, because the Keeper's got the Locus, so that makes him survivable if you roll it, because it means they can't get the attacks in and you've dictated the position in because you've done the charge. That's why I like the whip, because the one thing the Locus doesn't affect is monsters, because if you're within 1 of an inch a monster, you're within 1 of a monster. It doesn't matter. But the whip means that on a 3-up, they're -1 to hit, so it gives you an answer to single models with a good attack profile, whereas like the piling doesn't really help you there, but it helps you with like a unit of 30 witches. So I go for a bit more balance all round, rather than specialized. But I mean, they're all good. I mean, you know,
they are actually all the options are solid on him. There's also, of course, the fact that if you rolled an 11 on Sigvald, your plan might just be to kill something until it's dead, and then the Seeker can't keep the secrets, can't get killed.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, like he's I used to do this with the Mortis Engine and Arcan. Like the Mortis Engine being stood next to Arcan just limits the amount of models that can actually get to it. So you can use him as a blocker, and with pilings you have to go towards the closest. So Sigvald being on one unit in a place and him being slightly different means that they're not necessarily going to be able to get to you, even if you don't get the Locus roll off.
Absolutely. So Sigvald on the end.
Yeah, so or even if Sigvald's just stood next to the keeper, it stops the amount of things that can get around the base to hit him.
Absolutely.
So it's there's definitely a lot that could be done with that tag team. You know, I kind of think of it a bit like a duo going in, like in perfect harmony, smashing stuff.
And of course they just glide into battle, wouldn't they? It'd be beautiful.
Exactly. So Keeper of Secrets, really good. Now the one thing I will mention, just as we're still on this, I know we've been talking about the Keeper for a while, is Wizard. Obviously, the turn you come on, you wouldn't be able to use the spell. If you're playing a different host where you're on the table, it's a bit different. But if you into a double turn, or they've had a turn and they've tried to kill you and they haven't managed to do it, and you get a turn, you've got spells and you can heal. So one of the spells that you have access to is Born of Damnation. And the reason I know that he's a greater demon, so he could pick Progeny, which only heals demons, but Born of Damnation will heal Sigvald as well. And it's pick a Hedonite hero within 6, and they can heal up to D3 wounds.
You still get your depravity when you heal as well, don't you? You just have to have taken.
Well, because the way it works is depravity comes in the battle shock. So you have your turn, you go in and fight. If you're going to double, or you don't, but to say you're going to double, you take some damage. A battle shock phase, you get your depravity because it's the battle shock phase. Then it goes into the turn roll. If you win the turn roll, it's your hero phase. You cast a spell, you heal, you're back to full wounds. You've still got the depravity for the turn before. So you're back to full, but you've still managed to get that depravity. If they go and they kill you, then tough luck. But if they don't kill you, then
you're getting tasty.
You've got the chance to get that depravity back at the end as well, and then heal after that fact. So depending on the situation, but having a way to heal Sigvald 6 wounds when they're so hard to get off of him is a really good ability to have. Obviously, it gives you Mystic Shield, which allows you to reroll 1s on the save. You've got other things you can do. So if you do want to take an endless spell like Life Swarm, again, that's another way to heal. So you could really lean into that, and you get 2 spells for the Keeper. So depending,
you can also ping. You can ping yourself and then heal yourself, and you still get the depravity, because you just have to have allocated a wound to someone that wasn't negated, and healing isn't negating, right?
No, because I believe it's you're at the end when you get to the battle shock phase, you see how many wounds, if any wounds have been allocated, and I don't know if they have, because they're not there anymore. If that makes sense.
Yeah, okay. At the end of the battle shock phase, you receive 1 depravity point for each unit on the battlefield that had a wound or mortal wound that was not negated allocated to it in that turn, or has fewer models than it had at the start of that turn.
Interesting. Maybe you would.
Realised I've asked you a Byron question here, so you're trying to break things. You did allocate, right? So
yeah, technically you did allocate it, but then you healed it back.
I love the idea of that.
But wounds that you do an after save and negate, they don't count.
Yes,
but ones you've allocated.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you could actually, in that case, so things like Life Form and things like that still work. So that's quite useful to know.
Yeah, it's a tasty one. There's some lists that I've written that are playing around that stuff. There feels very appropriately Slaanesh-y. So just worth noting, his Mirror Shield is it's not optional, so you can't choose to take 1 wound on him and then heal it. You always have to take your 4+ save on Sigvald.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. I didn't really realise that.
Oh yeah, I've been getting nerdy, Russ.
Because it doesn't say can. Sometimes it says can, doesn't it? You can roll. Like, that's the thing about Chaos Warriors. Because we were talking about Chaos Warriors versus Demonettes, and I said, like, you don't have to take your mortal save if you don't want to.
Blew my mind.
Yeah, you were like, what? And I was like, yeah. So
my list changed for the 4th time.
Yeah. So it wouldn't be a Slaanesh show if I didn't talk about Fat Man. I don't mean me. I mean Glutus or Skillion. So we talk about him a lot in the other show. I'll give you the bridge dates. Basically, -1 to hit bubble. That's all we really need to say. I know he's move 8, but we've rerolled
potential heal as well on him, right? Yeah. And he's a wizard.
Yeah, well, that's the next point is Gorge on excess command ability. So pick a Hedonite unit within 12, use it in the hero phase. So you can't do it on the turn you come on, but if you were playing Pretenders and you were more defensive, this could be a better option. Obviously, it makes him a lot harder to kill, but also it means that if you use this, then any wounds, so if a unit's destroyed and any wounds like in excess, heal you. And if there's one thing Sigvald's good, it's good at blowing up units. So
or excess, just in general.
Well, in general, just excessively sexy damage. So
it's quite nice in Slaanesh as well, because if you wipe something out, you don't get a depravity. So it kind of makes you feel like there was, if you wiped something out when you wanted to leave it alive on 1 wound, or you wanted to just do 1 wound and you went crazy by accident,
it's the optimist army, because you've got to be an optimist to play with them, right? So, it's got to find that silver lining in everything. So like, I didn't kill something, at least I get a depravity point.
Tweet.
But so Glutus or Skillion is great. Like, again, it's a command ability. So you notice that there's a lot of stuff that is all command abilities. Now you're going to have to be really careful with that resource if you haven't banked that resource. Yeah,
and the command ability is the most reliable and, generally speaking, most powerful ones in our list, probably. So as we get further towards the end, we'll be stretching a little bit, but these are things that you probably won't have to pay for.
No.
Like this Celeste combination, when we come to that, there's some weird stuff that you can do.
And we might as well talk about Celeste now, as you brought it up. So
you and I had this idea at the same time, didn't we? When we were looking through.
So I love Celeste. It's one of my favourite Slaanesh models from the latest sort of range, and I think it's my took Invaders Celeste to ETC, and purely for the power of Subvert, and which allows you to stop people using command abilities. So it's a spell, but I love it. But okay, so why Celeste? Okay, so you notice that Sigvald hits on a 2, which is great, but hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s is better.
Significantly better. You've got a 1 in 36 chance of missing with his attack if you're doing
instead
that.
of a 1 in 6, so it's huge. Rerolls, just if people aren't aware, rerolls are the most powerful buff you can get in Age of Sigmar. Anything that lets you reroll is better than a +1.
And when you're re-rolling on something that's already at a high level, you're basically looking at taking probability and turning it into pretty much, known entities and definites.
Plus, you get to roll more dice. Yeah, let's roll more dice. This is why daughters are so good. So basically, you can reroll hit rolls of 1s if by Hedonite units wholly within 18. If the number of mortal Hedonites wholly within 18 is equal to the number of demon Hedonite units wholly within 18.
Now, this is normally awkward AF, isn't it? Yeah. It's not, I'm not going to say it's stupid or anything, but it's almost impossible that you're going to manage to do this unless...
It requires significant planning unless you're both the only 2 models on their side of the table on turn 1, because you've ambushed them both. And Celeste is a demon and Sigvald is a mortal. So the 2 of those basically allows you to trigger that ability.
Holding hands.
For free, just being there. It's wholly within 18, which allows Sigvald to get a big charge, move quite far away. Celeste is only on a 50 mil round base, so it's quite easy to fit in as well.
He's also got run and charge if you can get him there via other means.
Yes. So you might, even if you don't get the ambush, if you deploy on your 8, you've got an 8-inch run and charge, probably re-rolling that charge because of the thing, and then if you get the charge, you'll be within range in the combat phase to use that ability. It's also a demon, So you get the Locus. It's only on a 4+, but if you make the charge, you still get the benefit of the Locus. Yeah. Significantly squishier than a Keeper, but still 9 wounds with a 4-up save.
Yeah. Cheaper than a Keeper too.
Yeah, but 200 points. It's pretty much a bargain. So for me, like, Slaanesh allows Sigvald to be better, more reliable, basically. I think the trifecta would be Slaanesh, Keeper, Sigvald, and Mirrors, because I think with Mirrors you could be like Slothful Stupor and Subvert through. You've got the pile in attack twice. You've also got the abilities on your hit rolls and stuff. And then what you can do, you can use a unit of like Hellstriders or Seekers to run up with in your turn to put them in range to trigger that buff if you got all 3 off the table, which might be quite nasty. But someone would have had to make quite a big mistake to let you put all 3 of those in their back lines.
Yeah.
But you can always come on from the side, so there are ways and means. I mean, the good thing about that D3 is you just don't have to use it until you look at the board state and go, actually, there's nowhere to go, so I'm not going to bother. But absolutely, it's so good.
Who's next in the list of characters that hold hands nicely with Siggy?
It's probably worth talking about the Contorted Epitome.
Yeah, which is quite I think this is probably something that people haven't thought of putting in their list, because you look at the points and think you won't. But yeah, it's something that I've come round to more in terms of the idea of doing so. Yeah, and it particularly scales well. I mean, the thing is, it's got Overwhelming Acquiescence as a spell. Now, again, you'd have to be on the table. It's got a 24-inch range, so you're probably unlikely to be able to tag the thing on the first turn. However, it's quite good because you get multiple units, and you get the reroll 1s to hit. So it's pretty strong. Obviously, you get 2 spells. So the Contorted's got quite good rules. But what that means is basically like you get the reliability on Sigvald, like with the reroll 1s from a spell. It's quite hard to cast, and you can use Acquiescence on any of the normal heroes. So you can obviously use the demon heroes who've all got that spell pretty much, the heralds, which works really well. But one of the things that's quite good as well, looking at it, is that you've got this horrible fascination ability. So start of the combat phase, you can roll a dice for each enemy unit within 3, and on a 4+, the model cannot be picked as a target of attacks. So if you were using Sigvald and the Contorted against an enemy big bad survivable thing, you could go in with both. If you obviously get the Locus, wouldn't matter if it's a single model, but you might better tag an infantry unit nearby or whatever. You could fight with Sigvald first, because he does. Then it's your turn, so you could pick Sigvald again. Then when they pick their big monster, they can't hit the Epitome, because the Epitome hasn't attacked. So they have to hit Sigvald, which is pretty good, because you could then spend the armor save plus on him and go, well, he's got a 2-up save, 4-up after. I'm pretty happy you hitting him because he's done his 2 rounds of attacks already. I've already got the value. And what the Epitome does then is then gets to try and finish off even if it's left. Yeah. So it's a little bit of a renegade choice. It's more expensive than Slaanesh, so I think I would rather take Slaanesh, but it's an interesting choice. It's certainly something that you might think about for your list, because of the other stuff with the magic it does. It gets to reroll casting. It's got a 2-up mortal wound save, and the fact it's also I think it used to disrupt the enemy casting, but I don't know if it does anymore. Infernal Enrapturous is the one that does that now. So reroll successful casting rolls for enemy wizards that are within 24. I think you used to be able to reroll unbinding rolls for it in the old rules, so which you can't anymore. But still pretty good. I don't know. I vaguely remember having a rule, but I might be thinking of the Enrapturous. Anyway, it doesn't matter because it's all out of date now. But the Epitome is worth mentioning. It's not, I wouldn't say it's like super, super good. I think there's a sexy one coming next, right? Is Shard Speaker? Is that the one you're talking about? Shard Speaker or the Mask. I think they're both affordable in points and sexy options. Yeah, so the Shard, I haven't got the Mask up, but I can get the Mask up. So that's right. We'll do Shard Speaker first then. So the Shard Speaker
is worth talking about, because you get to affect wound rolls. Anything that you're trying to make him survive, you've got a spell which, you know, means that they're -1 to wound. It's short range, so you did use something like the spell mirrors, but because it's a debuff, you could debuff the enemy unit you're planning to put him into, then he goes into it, so you don't have to be on the table to be buffed, because this model debuffs the enemy. And his other ability, which is Twisted Mirror, so in your shooting phase, pick an enemy unit within 9, and then on a 3+, you get +1 to wound in the combat phase. Now, if you're movement 6 with a reroll charge with 9, you might be able to get close. It's normally going to be a turn 2 thing, but you might be able to get within 9. You won't be able to ambush within 9 because you're 9 away, so you're not going to be able to use it on the ambush. But if in a follow-up turn or a double turn, you can get +1 to wound on an enemy unit after you move this model. So that range looks short, but it's actually quite long.
Yeah, also this guy, if he gets a spell off, he becomes more survivable because he gets +2 to a save.
Yeah.
Which, you know, when you're looking at his stats, he looks a lot more squishy than if you're able to cast something which is probably going to be his spell on a 6, which is not too much to ask, really. And then you've got 5 wounds and a 3-up save, which isn't bad whatsoever. He also gets quite a bit more fighty. If you do get that spell off, you get to use his aggressive profile.
Yeah. So, but I think the 2 abilities of the Twisted Mirror and the spell affecting wound rolls, 1 -1 to theirs, 1 +1 to yours, but they're cast on the enemy unit, so it's quite good.
You might want to shoot that unit or whatever. You know, it's nice.
Yeah, this only affects in the combat phase, those 2 abilities. So the Twisted Mirror is combat phase, and the other one is -1 to their wound rolls in the combat phase. But it's not good.
Okay, cool.
These little nuances, it's fine. I got you on one. I think we're about like 1-0 now. 2-1, I don't know. Yeah, so basically that's there. And then if I go to...
I can start talking about the mask now. So
the mask,
the mask is making its way into a lot of my lists. I think the Shard Speaker is making its way into quite a lot of yours. And then the mask I have liked since early, and then I ummed and ahed about it, and now I just really like the stats and the options you get with it. So to run through the headline stuff, movement 10, I'm good already for something on foot. That's awesome. 5 wounds, 5-up save. A few attacks, but what you're really after is the special abilities of this model. Notably, it's got a 4-up after save as well, and I really like a lot of my Slaanesh lists. I'm prioritizing after saves fairly heavily because your army is quite squishy. So not just saves against mortal wounds, but just after saves against anything. And having a 4+ is absolutely awesome.
Yeah, and it's can run and charge, and it's also eligible to fight if it's within 6 of an enemy, and it can be with an extra 3 when it piles in. And you get a reroll to hit against enemy units that have a move of 10 or less, and reroll wounds against something that's got a move of 5 or less, so can be really good at killing stuff. Now, the reason you probably say, what has this got to do with Sigvald? But the point with this model is that you could run up the table and charge and be a model that's a demon for the Locus, but also is quite hard to kill and it's quite disruptive. So you can basically get it in to the same place that Sigvald's in to mean that with pile-ins they can't necessarily pile in as much into him, or you could even.
It's also got a flexible option in the hero phase as well. You can choose to add D3 to your attacks, or heal D3 wounds. And that's, you know, like that. Both of those are great, and sometimes you're going to be desperate for one, and it'll be awesome to have, and sometimes you'll be desperate for the other.
Yeah, and I think she's a great addition from a hero point of view for the army. But yeah, so I did bring her up because she doesn't have a lot of synergy with Sigvald.
Not directly. She's just a nice thing to stand with her. Having small base. That's where I'd be coming out with this stuff. If you're going to psych your opponent out for one small base, why not have a second one? And being able to double team with those two is just going to be mega irritating. The plan for a lot of my lists that involve the the ambushing host that we're talking about would be to potentially have one or both of these coming on from the same side or either sides, because that's just annoying, and then have fast-moving units far away enough here that your opponent has a really difficult time judging what they're going to do, whether they are shooting units or charging units in terms of their intent. And you've got so many swift-moving guys that actually being able to get from 12 inches here to 24 inches there, it's doable in Slaanesh quite consistently, actually.
Yeah, and the Lurid Haze, even if you've got a slightly slower unit, you can always bring them on from the side. So, yeah, you've got a lot of options. I think one of the things that I know Vince talked about with the Locus and pile-ins with the Slick Blade Seekers is that you can, anything with more than 2-inch reach, basically, you can tag the keeper on the corner, make sure they can't pile in, and then if you take the formation Seeker Cavalcade, you get to pile in within 6 with those Seeker units, so Slick Blades get affected by that, and they've got a 2-inch reach, so you can basically be 6 away, you don't have to worry about charging. Keeper goes in, stops them piling in, so you can just see whether that works or not before you pile in.
Tacky, isn't it?
And then
Flexible.
If it works, you go, right, I'll pile in, and I'll just be just within 2 to fight. So they can hit the enemy, but the enemy can't hit them if they've got a 1-inch reach.
It's a lot of turn 2 potential options in Slaanesh, I think, which are going to take a lot.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of play, positional play, and a lot of tactics around the Locust, the pile in, fighting twice, multiple activations, charging and then killing screens, overrunning again, using your shooting and your magic. I think there's a lot of potential in the army, and I think it's very technical to play. But I think if you're I'd say that when we talked about the army being competitive, I think if you're a good player, there's going to be a lot of stuff you can catch people out with this army.
This book has a high ceiling.
Yeah.
So once you've mastered it, I think you could, especially given that it will be underestimated, because it is, I would say, largely slightly overpointed.
Yeah.
People are just going to dismiss it as a result of that, and you can see why, because you don't want to feel like you're overpaying for stuff. But if you're capable of being at this level with a blunt army, something that just goes somewhere and does something, this army has so many options that you're going to be able to reach to here if you put in the time or the thought or the practice.
Yeah, and with Sigvald, he's 260 points. I think he's well worth it. He gives you something that nothing else in the army can do, which is ignore after saves.
He could be 230 though, couldn't he? Let's face it.
Yeah, he could be. But in Invaders, he's 210 because you get a command point when he dies.
And if he doesn't die, he's done some work.
So that's fine.
Yeah.
So yeah, exactly. He's earned his survivability. So one thing that I thought we could probably talk about as a bit of a renegade support is we talk about allies. Okay,
I'm listening. This is normally me saying silly stuff. Off you pop.
Well, we talked about it the other day, and I think it was you brought it up originally, so I'll give you the credit for this.
Sure.
And it's to do with Kairos Fate Weaver. Now,
it's got Byron written all over it, hasn't it?
He's a big points investment at 400 points, and you could argue, is he worth it? But
don't have to paint 400 points of infantry models. That's one model instead of potentially 20. That's great.
But you could paint the Fat Man.
Could do.
He's obviously, Kairos is what Kairos is, right? Okay, so he's got a lot of rules. A lot of it's kind of irrelevant. One of the rules that would be pretty stupid with Sigvald is the Oracle of Eternity rule, which is once per battle, you can replace a single dice on your choice, and in there is charge rolls. Now, not only does that mean you're going to get the charge, because if you roll a double 1, okay, you get +3 to your charge, so that's a 5. You change the 1 to a 6, so that's 10. You're going to make the charge. You cannot fail the charge.
Going in with a minimum of 7 attacks.
If you roll a 5 or 6 on one of the 2 dice, the other dice could be a 6. You are guaranteeing 11 or 12 attacks on Sigvald. Plus, he gets +3 to charge. So if you're going 11, and that's a 33% chance on either dice. So I think it works out about, it's quite likely that you're going to get a 5 upon one of the 2 dice. I think it's like 60% plus chance, because I think you add it together, so it'll be what? It'd be a 2 in 6 plus 2 in 6, so it's what, 4 in 12. So yeah, so so it's a 33% chance basically if you're getting on one of those. But anyway, maths is probably wrong. Someone will tell me I'm wrong. It's fine.
I think it's more than that. More,
I think it's 60% or something like that. But anyway, you're basically got a chance to roll 11 or 12. So that means your charge roll is going to be 14, 15.
That's already great. So and then a pile in
so
on a small base.
So you imagine like where you can get that model
anywhere you want
in their army. So you could do something really random, like be 9 away and then charge round something and then fight. And then your 11 attacks is pretty ridiculous. Now, Kairos is a bit of a silly like meme model for that, but I mean that ability is so powerful it cannot be understated, because even if you don't need to use it, you can use it on them when they charge you can use it on armor save, you can use it on pretty much anything. So like it's really good. So for me it's great. So like I think you can, with him, because he's got an interaction with the charge roll, having someone who can manipulate that and he fits in allies at 400 points means that
you're probably still going to have a keeper as well. And if you rolled
no other models.
Oh yeah, that's
what is that like? Is that like 800 points for those 3 characters?
400, 260, 660 plus whatever the keeper is.
340. So he's just 1,000 points.
That's a nice number.
Yeah. So
if you rolled an 11 on your charge though, once you changed it, you could be getting 22 attacks. That's a story.
If you get those 2 models off, and then you've got the keeper, and then you've managed to, however bizarrely, done the 11, and the keeper's still within range, you can do like the extra pile in. I mean, like going twice with 22, 24 attacks would be.
Sounds like something for Pano, doesn't it? That's a story. Yeah. He does. I know it is memey, but also Kairos is very, very reliable at casting, and you jumped on the option for popping in mirrors, didn't you?
Yeah, and one of the things he does is he goes, while friendly wizards are within 18, hold within 18, he knows the spells on their war scrolls, so he can cast the Slaanesh spells
very reliably, because you match. You roll
the lowest dice to the highest dice. So
if you roll a 5 and a 1, you get 2 5s with him.
So he's got 3 spells a turn as well. So he's particularly good, and he also has Spell Eater. So once per turn, you can pick an endless spell and just dispel it. So if
that could be yours or your opponent's.
Yeah. But what's quite nice about that is, if you've got an ability, a spell that you want to recycle, you cast it, it's done its thing, you want to recycle it, you don't have to roll to unbind it, you don't have to give up a cast, you don't have to give up your dispel. Or
get rid of it because you don't want your opponent to have it if the turn roll doesn't go exactly as expected, something like that.
So it's only in your hero phase, but so it's when you have your turn, but still really good. And I think he gives you a spell as well, which allows you to plop out chaos spawns. So
it's not bad in the army, you know. If you're going to be annoying, you may as well be properly annoying.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's not rubbish, let's put it that way.
Yeah. So,
and the good thing about depravity, it doesn't matter that he doesn't have a Slaanesh keyword. If he's hurt and not dead, he's going to give you depravity. So he's not a bad option. So it's definitely worth considering him as an ally. I would say that if you're trying to really lean into Sigvald, might sound a little bit ridiculous, but Kairos Fate Weaver in a Slaanesh army.
He's pretty magnificent. I think they could be pros.
Yeah, they could be. Why can't we be friends? It's like, so I would say that, that's a bit of a renegade ally. But so just to go over everything, basically we've saying that Sigvald in Lurid Haze is really strong. Mm-hmm. You've got the option for Pretenders. It's also quite viable. He synergizes really well with like the Keeper and Shalesk particularly.
Consider your command points.
Yeah, you need to really think about how many command points are in your list, depending on how you're going to use him. Mm-hmm. Anything that allows you to reroll to hit, reroll ones to hit, bonuses to wound, all really good, because you want him to do as much as possible. Manipulation of the charge roll, really important, and he's pretty awesome. So hopefully that's giving you some ideas to write some Sigvald-centric lists.
Yeah, and anything standing next to him as well, just as a general concept. If he is here and you can have him backed up by any other unit, if that takes some hits back, you're going to get depravity. If it's Hellstriders with Hell Scourges, like, you know, there's some survivability there, and it's just awkward for your opponent. And you have enough fast units that you can very easily use him to anchor this side or that side, depending which one's the most or least scary, and then just have 5 squishy things that, you know, maybe your archers or something else that you're not against having there, so they can back him up, score an objective, and farm that depravity for turn 2 or 3.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that'll wrap it up for this little video about Sigvald. So let us know your Sigvald list in the comments. There's still time to check out the.
Or if there's any interactions we've not clocked. If there is, I'd be surprised. I'm actually maybe there's some clever nerds out there. Let's see. I want the most stupid one. Try and beat Kairos.
So put that in the comments below if you like it, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed it, and check out our other Slaanesh videos, and we'll talk again soon.
Depravity.